Hey Earth scientists, we're looking at Unit 4, Biosphere, and you're going to notice that a lot of the information for this unit we've already covered in your 8th grade science class. So a lot of this is just an extension on that material and looking at things in a little more detail. So we know that the word bio, the stem bio, means life. So this is specifically looking at your ecosystems on Earth, all the ecosystems from the subsea floor bacteria and abiotic and biotic factors all the way up to living organisms that might live at the highest elevation. So we're talking about all those factors that may affect different types of living organisms in different ecosystems. So these are the topics we'll be covering throughout the week. And this week is just, or this unit is just 1 week. So you should keep on pace and make sure that you're able to get everything completed. And your assessment at the end of the week is just a quiz that is 10 questions. So it should be really easy for you to be successful at that based on the information we've learned in the EE course and also in science class. Let's take a look at your vocabulary for this chapter. So again, you have already had most of these vocabulary terms, so this shouldn't be new information for you. So biosphere is going to be basically incorporating all of the spheres, all the biotic and abiotic factors that can affect organisms on Earth. So that's going to include from the soil to the air and sunlight and the atmosphere, water, so all the different things that will impact living organisms and those ecosystems in which the living organisms are going to exist. Invasive species is the next term. So invasive species are going to be organisms that are non-native, so they are not naturally found in those particular habitats, but for whatever reason they have invaded that ecosystem. So lionfish are a big example that we're starting to see more around the U.S. coastlines, particularly around Florida. So they are venomous fish and they cause a lot of problems for those ecosystems. Also snakes. So these pythons are very problematic. People will get pythons and think, oh, they're such a cute snake, I can keep it as a pet. And then later realize, oh, well, it can get to be like 15 feet long. So this Burmese python maybe isn't the best pet for me. And then they'll set it out into the wild and those snakes just grow up to be big old snakes. And so they're really problematic for native wildlife, like in the case of the Burmese python here that's trying to eat the deer. Abiotic and biotic factors we've talked about a lot. Abiotic means without life. Biotic means bio, life. So abiotic factors are things that are not alive that impact an ecosystem. So that could be water, soil, sunlight, air. Biotic factors are going to be things that are alive or related to biological interactions and processes. So bacteria, animal, plants, fungi, competition, symbiotic relationships, those are examples of biotic factors. Carrying capacity. This graph is a nice graph of carrying capacity because it shows reference to the population and also variation of the population in relation to carrying capacity. So the carrying capacity line that we see here is this particular population in millions, and that carrying capacity is basically just the amount of organisms that the particular habitat can support based on the natural resources that are available. Limiting factors, your next vocabulary term. So limiting factors are things that restrict an environment, that keep or that restrict the population specifically in an environment. So we have talked about in class density dependent and density independent limiting factors. So population density dependent are going to depend on the population, the amount of organisms of that species. So for example, competition is one big example. So if you have 5 wolves in an area versus 1, the more dense population of 5 wolves is going to have more competition. Also, disease is another big one because organisms that are in really close contact are going to be able to spread disease more readily. So that's density dependent. Density independent limiting factors are going to be not dependent on the amount of the population. So for example, natural disasters, the tornado that's coming through doesn't care how many squirrels there are in the area or how many people are in the area. If there's going to be a tornado, it's going to be a tornado. Volcanic eruptions, natural disasters, elevation, like the mountain doesn't care about how many flowers want to grow on the mountain because the mountain's going to be as tall as it's going to be. So those are limiting factors. Biomes are looking at specific organisms and their habitats and the physical characteristics of an area based on the particular climate. So you can see there's lots of different types of biomes that are around the world, and you can see the distribution of those. So biomes are going to be based on the climate of the area. Biodiversity, bio, again, life. And anytime you see the word or a part of the word diverse or diversity, it's referring to differences. So biodiversity is just looking at the variations in living organisms, the variability of organisms that you might have, even down to the genetic level, genetic variations, and the alleles that might be present. So that can be genetic level, all the way up to organism, species, populations. Geothermal energy, we've talked about energy sources in class as well. So geothermal, we know, means geo, earth, therm, heat. So it is generating energy, generating electricity based on the earth's heat. So what ends up happening is water is pumped down to kind of a reservoir area, and it's going to be heated up from a magma chamber. Magma from some kind of volcanic activity is going to be necessary, or just a magma chamber in itself. So that's going to heat up the water, which then is going to be pumped up and can allow these turbines to spin to generate the electricity. Variations is a reference to differences. So if you have variations within a species, then it's talking about all the differences with looking at a specific characteristic in a species. So this picture is just looking at the different types of wings for this type of bee. So curly wings, cut wings, rudimentary wings, short wings, long wings, the placement of the wings. So those are all variations. They're all differences. A fuel cell is going to be a reference to hydrogen fuel. So you have in a fuel cell apparatus, you have hydrogen that is brought into the fuel cell, and also oxygen. So what happens when the hydrogen fuel goes into the anode here is that it basically splits apart the subatomic particles. So it separates the protons and the electrons, and it's going to force the electrons into a little circuit that will allow for it to generate electricity. And then the leftover protons and electrons from hydrogen are going to combine with oxygen to make, you guessed it, water. So that water is a byproduct of this fuel cell. So it's going to release heat, it's going to generate electricity, and also produces water as a waste product, essentially. Population is looking at the amount of a particular species in an area. So from the lowest level, we have one organism, and then a bunch of the same type of species in an area is going to be the population. So all the deer in Cleveland County, for example. A community is looking at all the different types of living things in the area. So we have deer, we have trees, we've got grass, there's some birds. And then ecosystem is all the biotic and abiotic. So we have the community of all the different types of living organisms, but then we have weather factored in, and sunlight, and we have water and whatever else. So the particular population is looking at the amount of the same species. And then ecological footprint is looking at basically a human's impact on the earth, or the human's impact on the land area based on the natural resources that person uses, or the materials that relate to things that person is going to use, and how that person may try to offset that impact by recycling and good conservation practices. So we have your first discussion question here, and this is reference to your ecological impact. So you can go to this website here and see how many Earths you need in order to survive based on the types of natural resources that you will use or your activities will use. This is your template for your Unit 4 online notebook, so make sure that you submit it when you get finished. So you have vocabulary section in here. You also have your paragraph reflection first, like we usually do. So scroll down through your vocabulary, and you have a word box there that will help you to look through the vocabulary. And then we've got a couple different videos that we're watching in this unit, so you have some notes to take on those videos. So biotic and abiotic. Biotic, alive, abiotic, without life. So biotic factors are going to include bacteria, animals, plants, fungi, and processes that are related to those interactions like competition, symbiotic relationships, parasitism. And then abiotic factors are going to be things that never were alive, that are not alive. So that's going to include the soil, drought, flooding, precipitation, weather, sunlight, air, things like that. And we talked about that in class, so that should be just a quick review for you. So how do biotic and abiotic factors affect diversity and biodiversity? There's a couple little video clips here. They're short video clips to help you understand biodiversity. So this is just biodiversity in general. It's a good TED Talk. And then this one is looking at tropical rainforest ecosystems, focusing on the Amazon. So after you watch those videos to help you have a better understanding, you're going to take notes in your online notebook, and then you can post to this discussion just your takeaways or your findings and thoughts about having watched those videos and how you've generated a better understanding about biodiversity. So what else is going to affect biodiversity? So the strength of an ecosystem depends on the strength of the species that live there. So this is going to tie in genetic variations. So if you live somewhere that has a lot of ice, like Antarctica or Arctic regions, you're likely going to look different than an organism that might be in a desert or in a forest area. So if you have an Arctic fox, for example, a fox that is white, they're going to blend in more to these icy environments rather than a desert or a woodland forest. So which population is going to be stronger? Population where you have a lot of genetic variations, or a population where everything is identical? So in order for species to survive, there's variation, and organisms are going to have those variations that will allow them to survive better. Those that survive are going to be able to thrive and to pass on the genetic variations that allow them to survive. So those strong genes are what's going to help that particular population to survive. So we're looking at biomes here. So this is a map showing you worldwide distribution of different types of biomes. So biomes are going to be focused on the physical characteristics of the area, the habitat, the weather and climate of the region, and also looking at with this video here, looking at what helps organisms to survive in those particular biomes. And you're going to take notes in your online notebook about the biome video and your understanding of biomes. Carrying capacity. So we looked at the graph earlier of carrying capacity. So carrying capacity is the basically the amount of a particular population that the environment can support based on the natural resources that are available. So basically how that particular environment can sustain that population indefinitely based on what is provided naturally. So we've looked at in class population density dependent and independent limiting factors. So you can review that here, or you can take a look at your notes from class. So common limiting factors are going to be water, food, basically access to natural resources, having access to shelter or land, living space. Bacteria is another example of causing disease potentially. So there's a lot of different types of limiting factors. So what are some effects on North Carolina? You've probably seen kudzu. There's a lot of kudzu around here. So kudzu is an example of a non-native invasive species. So kudzu was brought into the United States to control erosion and kind of has taken over a lot of different habitats. So kudzu grows a foot a day, and a lot of people are kind of looking at how to use kudzu efficiently and how to use it for different products. Even eating kudzu and making like kudzu jelly and things like that, because it is used or it's found in so many places. It's found all over. So anytime you see structures like this or wooded areas like this with all this vine kind of tangled mess, that's kudzu. And kudzu basically can be a competition species, can sort of act parasitic. So it can be a competition species in that if it is growing on trees, then it's either the tree survives or the kudzu survives. So the kudzu basically uses the ability of the tree to be tall to get access to sunlight. So eventually kudzu unfortunately takes over a lot of habitats. Africanized bees are another example of an invasive species. Fire ants. Burmese pythons are a big one in Florida and wetland areas like the Everglades. So there's a lot of problems with Burmese pythons, and unfortunately with global warming, what's ending up happening in the United States is that the Burmese pythons aren't staying located in Florida, which is where they have traditionally been a non-native invasive species, but they're starting to move further north, which eventually means you could have some Burmese pythons hanging out in your backyard in North Carolina. Yay, climate change. Alternative energy. So there's a lot of different types of alternative energy that we've looked at in class, whether it's using biomass or solar energy, wind power. So we know that these photovoltaic cells are going to be used for solar energy. So take a look at this video, and in your online notebook, you're going to be jotting down some notes about renewable energy sources and renewable energies that can be used in North Carolina and throughout the United States. And this is your last discussion post. So we're posting this on a pretty little Google slide. So you can just go to this link here, or you can click on this slide in order to open it. So I posted a little text box here and I put my response. So what can you do to make sure that you don't leave a negative ecological impact? So based on the information that you've learned, you're just going to type in a little textbook about something that you personally can do in order to not have a negative ecological footprint. When you are finished learning all the information about the biosphere, go ahead and take your quiz, and you can see that it is only 10 questions, so it's worth 10 points. And make sure you submit that. You only got one shot, but we've learned this in class and in your EE course online, so you guys should do great.